Okay, hey everybody, Miss Lynch here. So this is the second half of Chapter 1's lecture. Having lots of Wi-Fi issues at home, so part of my lectures may be in class like this. I also forgot my headphones at home today, so I don't have my microphone. I apologize if it's echoey. I'm trying to stay close to the microphone, so hopefully I won't do that. Okay. Picking up where we left off, you should have your notes in front of you, your PowerPoint pulled up, your textbook in front of you, something to write with, something to write on, all right? Okay, picking up where I had left off, the last thing we had said in our first lecture was, yeah, we left off with Columbus. My slideshow's pulled up in front of me, so if you see me looking that way, that's what that's about. So, Christopher Columbus, okay, start over. Funded by the Spanish crown, as we said, initially looking for a quicker trading route in India and China, and there's a shift that begins to focus more on silver and gold, and he sent the opposite direction to find, this quickest route. That's where we left off, basically. They leave on August 3rd, 1492, and they are at sea for 3 months. 2 months. Yeah. Alrighty, so if you look at your slideshow, I have a map. This is a current map of the Caribbean. So Cuba, Haiti, Bahamas, this is what we're talking about, all right? So they land there in October 1492 on October 12th. So where they land was San Salvador Island, and they named it Hispaniola. So these are kind of facts that we know that we have been taught in the past. One thing we are not often told, so I'm going to discuss it, is the fact that, obviously Columbus was the captain of the ship, so whenever it came down to it, he got the spoils of whatever this crew found. But it was supposed to be whoever spotted land received this bonus from the Spanish crown. So naturally, who sees land first in ships? It's the lookout, all right? So, and you guys will see on your PowerPoint, I have Rodrigo de Triana. He was the lookout. He spotted land to begin with, and whenever it was reported, Christopher Columbus claimed that he had, in fact, physically seen the land himself for the first time. And so that's why I wanted you guys to read Columbus's diary. And actually on that note, I'm kind of shifting any of the supplemental readings, anything that was supposed to be extra reading for any chapter we're doing, anything that's outside of the textbook. So for example, Christopher Columbus's diary, I'm now making that extra credit. We're just sticking with the textbook. If you would like to read that, his diary, that is, you can give me a 1-paragraph summary of its significance, and that'll be a point on your final grade. So that's how all of those supplemental readings are going to go. It's now extra credit. If you need it, it's there. Alrighty. Let's see. Oh yeah, so the amount that was actually promised that Rodrigo was supposed to get was 100,000 maravedis, so we'll just say dollars. And actually, yeah, that was supposed to be a yearly pension. So he was supposed to get that $100,000 every year for the rest of his life. Never happened for him. All right, so Columbus gets this reward, and that is the beginning of European contact in the Western Hemisphere. All right, October 12th. 1492, like I said, let me pull up my little slide here. They are met by the local community known as the Arawak people. And you will look, I have a picture of them in this slideshow. So let's talk about the Arawaks for a minute. They lived in villages, they had crops, lived on maize, as many communities at this time in this area were doing. Also yams, so sweet potatoes. They had yarn that they spun and wove. They had no iron, so to speak, so no tools, but they did wear little gold earrings. There's my gold. So they wore gold earrings. Excuse me, I just finished my lunch, so I have hiccups. So as a result of these gold earrings, whenever the Spanish show up and they see this, they're like, oh, wait, we're supposed to be getting gold. That's us. That's our main goal here. So what do? They imprison those people. They take them prisoner and they're placed into a fort that was made of the timber from the Santa Maria, which had run aground and was unusable from that point on. So they build a fort and they imprison the Arawak people who have the jewelry that they are so desiring. This military post, like I said, this is called Navidad. Has a peaceful connotation, but it was not a peaceful place. Okay, so if you look at the next slide, this is the image I was talking about. So this is a photograph. So this is obviously more contemporary, not actually Arawak people, which I'll get to in a second, but Caribbean peoples from the same area. So I'm using this image as an example, all right? All right, back to the Spanish. So they show up and they claim that they had a title to this land because of papal authority. So what's papal authority? That is the authority of the Catholic Church, which was our main power at this point in time. They believed that it was God's will that they were sent over and that it was a religious right of theirs to overcome the Arawak people. And this will this will just spiral out of control. But so this is the beginning of it. Let's see. All right, so the Spanish, they relied on the idea that the Arawaks who had communal land, the fact that they had communal land meant that they were not, quote, using it properly. And so this is justification for the actions of the Spanish, for their own, they had to justify it to themselves in order to do this. So, believed that Arawaks were not using the land, even though, like I just said a minute ago, they had crops of maize and yams. They obviously had agriculture. It was just not the European model. So, that's considered problematic to the Spanish. The Arawaks viewed, like I said, common land. So they viewed land as a common resource, not a commodity, not something to seek after and go grab. And they didn't care about, there was not a system of wealth. They didn't care about accumulating the silver and gold, like we're talking about, or material goods. Even though this was a society of people, they had a social system in place. It just wasn't recognizable to the Spanish. In going back to the system of agriculture that was developed, so we're still on land use. Okay, good. Oh, I lost my spot. All right, so Arawak men, they hunted, they fished, and it was left to women in the community to attend to agricultural work. So men would go out and women would stay and attend to their land. So a division of labor. But so Europeans considered hunting and fishing to be leisurely and not real work. Again, this is just the European model, just applying that to people without seeking out other ways. So they viewed indigenous men as being lazy and viewed women as being mistreated and lacking freedom. The Europeans also argued that they were bringing freedom with private property. Also, true religion, as they called it, and the liberation of these, and again, quote, lots of air quotes here, uncivilized gender roles. So that agricultural work, like I just mentioned. Okie dokie. So our next slide, Return, is what it's titled. So like I said, the Santa Maria, it had run aground, couldn't use it. They had gone over with 3 ships, and so they returned to Spain with 2, La Nina and La Pinta. So this is in the winter of that year. And right off the bat, whenever they return to Spain, they bring prisoners with them. They bring this as an example of conversion. Again, quote. Yeah, so they were bringing these people back with them to show the Spanish crown, look at what we have done. Fund us more, give us more money, more ships, send us back, right? So that is the plan. Unfortunately, and we will see this again, this is not the only time this happens, but these enslaved people who were being sent to Europe froze to death during that passage. So, all right, so Columbus, he reports in Madrid, he goes to the court, speaking to the king and queen, and reports that he had actually made it to Asia, which we know is Cuba, so not Asia, and as he called it, an island off the coast of China, Hispaniola, so the Bahamas. Again, definitely not Asia, all right? Okay, 1492. So, next year, 1493, he got what he wanted. More ships, more money. He returns to the Bahamas with 17 ships this time and a crew of 1,200 people. Yeah, that's on your slide, good. Okay, 1,200 people. And their goal this time is to explore the region from where they've set up and then to establish a post so that the Spanish will have an official post on this side of the world. Okay? So they do this, build, explore around, continue to enslave people, and by 1515 there are 15 towns established in the Bahamas around, okay? Again, there is the main focus at this point for them is gold and enslaving people, all right? So slaves and gold, boom. All right, so let us move forward a little bit. Okay, so let's focus, our next one, slide goes to Haiti. So let's talk about Haiti for a minute. If you need to have a map up while I'm talking, by all means, nothing wrong with that. I love a map, you know, so do it. Alrighty, Haiti. So 1495, 1,500 people are detained. 500 of them, so a third of that group, are sent to Spain. And again, people die during that passage. So 200 people of the 500 died en route to Europe. So almost half. Individuals aged 14 or over were forced to mine for gold, or they faced extreme physical penalties. I won't get into all of that, but yes, extreme physical punishment that you guys can look into, but these people were treated horribly. Let's see. Okay, yeah, so that's up there. So by 1498, 125,000 people had died, so it's 250,000 people. And that made up half of the population of the Arawaks. So that's half of their population gone. So that's by 1498. This is 6 years. 6 years. All right, that's very rapid. Also, within that 6 years, no more gold. Depleted, it's gone. All right? Now that there's no gold to focus on, their prime, their main goal just becomes slavery. All right? So, no gold left, focus on slave labor, and like I said, there are 15 towns and growing. You know, they're just establishing towns all over this area and building plantations to put these enslaved people to work on. The next slide, it has our Arawak population decline. So the first number, that's 1515, their population was at 50,000 people. By 1550, it was down to 500. And within 100 years of that, so by 1650, it was 0. So that's why whenever I said that photograph I showed you, these are not Arawak people, these are just Caribbean peoples who I'm using as an example. This is why, because by 1650, this entire group of people had been wiped out. So, This, unfortunately, is just going to set up a pattern for this to happen over and over again. So let's get into our next slide, which is more conquests. I'm not going to go through all of these, but it's the same pattern, just in different regions with different people. All right, so we have Cortez doing the same thing in Mexico to the Aztecs and Teotihuacan. Pizarro, same thing with the Incan Empire along the Andes in Peru. Okay, so as that's happening, like I said, going back, Portugal is a big power. They begin to influence Spain. So Spain becomes our main kind of considered global power at this time. They control the Western Hemisphere with all of these fleets coming in and wiping out these people and taking all of their resources. So fleets just keep going back to Spain with silver and gold to the crown until eventually those resources are just depleted. I said completed. All right, do I have this listed? I sure do. Alrighty, next slide is trade. So you can list these things down. So trade, and there should be a map in your book. Let's see. Oh, well, if you look at 25, these are early Spanish conquests, so that goes on to the last thing I was just saying. So like I said, same pattern as Columbus, just other areas. So if you look at that map, you can see what I was talking about. I guess maybe that map comes a little later. I thought there was a map that showed all of the different trade routes. That's okay. Well, so trade from the Americas that's going back to Europe is maize, tomatoes, potatoes, peanuts, and tobacco, which next chapter I will get into the establishment of tobacco as an industry in itself. Okay, those are the things going from the Americas, and things coming from Europe, coming into the Americas, are it's things like wheat, rice, sugar cane, animals, so horses, cattle, pigs. They're sending things like ships. And again, this is going to be a big overarching theme for us, disease. So we're just going to see that over and over again. But that is something that, again with the hiccups, I'm so sorry. That is just something that comes with Europeans. So, all right, on the note of disease. Alrighty. Do I have that? Okay, so Mexico's population, there is a 90% drop from about 20 million people to 2 million people. This happens over the course of the 16th century, so the 1500s. Again, this has to do with disease. This is because of European contamination, violence, the enslavement of these people we're talking about. And so 80 million people in the Americas died between 1500 and 1650, which is, this marks after first European contact. Okay, so 80 million people. 80 million people. All right, so looking at North America, the indigenous population by 1900, so I know that's out of our scope, but by 1900, the indigenous population falls to 250,000 people. So that's 250,000 people. Think back whenever I said there were between 40 and 50 million people by the time the Europeans showed up, by this, well, contact with the Portuguese and the Spanish. So down to 250,000 people. That is huge. Okay. More about the old Spanish. So the Spanish established their capital city of Mexico City. They began approving of marriage between colonists and indigenous peoples as a way to spread Catholicism. And as a result of that, millions of people convert. And in 1542, so this is a significant shift, Spain declared that indigenous Americans were no longer enslaved. All right, so this is 1492 to now, or to 1542, so like a 50-year time span, Indigenous Americans were no longer enslaved, and this is when they began to shift to enslaving African people and bringing them overseas. So 1542, all right? We're gonna get into the change and development behind all of that. All right, so 1508, their first permanent colonies established at Puerto Rico. They began venturing up into Florida in 1513, so making their way up north. They're repelled by the Calusa people. So this is our like Seminole people area. All right, they take over, and we'll kind of get to this too about French involvement and things. But so the Spanish take over the French Huguenot fort of Fort Caroline, and this is at what is today Jacksonville, Florida. They established their military base there and call it St. Augustine, mostly as a way to combat pirates who were trying to take over ships near Havana and take them back to Europe. Also, pirates were very heavily involved in the slave trade. It was considered booty for them, truly. They would get a slave ship and they would then sell these slaves and get their reward for that. So pirates, slave traders, all right? We won't watch this in class, but if you guys have Netflix and you're interested, there's an episode of Explained, and it goes through the history of pirates and piracy and their involvement, especially whenever we get to Virginia and those first colonies, how they were funded and all that jazz. But it is very interesting. Do recommend if that's up your alley. Alrighty. Where am I? Okay. More with the Spanish, just exploring. Same thing's happening on the West Coast, working their way up all the way to Oregon. There are large mobile communities of the Spanish, so this involved hundreds of people. So this helped spread this disease that we're talking about. And like I had said, the Spanish become this global power, and behind that power and the image that people were being given, this was called the Black Legend. And so I'm gonna actually skip a slide, the Pueblo Revolt. I wanna come back to that later. Whenever we start talking about organization of peoples in response to European contact. Okay, so I will come back to that. Okie dokie. All right, yeah, all of this has to do with the Black Legend, which was propaganda. It was a propaganda campaign, but this spread across the globe and but told the story of Spain as being this brutal colonizer, because that's exactly what they were. Okay. In addition to the Spanish, we also have the French, who mostly stayed up north in Canada, so Quebec, as we know. This begins with Samuel de Champlain, so Lake Champlain. In 1608, he founded Quebec. I'd mentioned this in my last lecture, but, well, no, I didn't actually. So he descends down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. Again, the French spread disease, just like the Spanish. This was not only on the Spanish. French fur traders really established themselves in this area. They also convert to Catholicism because it's our main religion at the time. And because of the fur trade in Canada, this really incorporates our indigenous communities into global trade, because they will start acting as guides and hosts for a lot of our French fur traders, and it gets them involved in this global market. All right. Yeah, the Atlantic economy is how I refer to it in our slide here. So, yeah, basically this will cause them different nations and communities to get involved with different European powers, and it creates different rivalries and just a lot of tension and I will say confusion, because there was just a lot of animosity. There was, you know, every group was different. So yeah, alrighty. And again, something we will definitely hit on as we move along. This is not the only time this will get mentioned. So, alrighty. So, Spanish, French, and then we also have the Dutch. The Dutch will, the Dutch and then British involvement, this kind of is what we are usually told about as being our first colonies. So the Dutch, like we have Henry Hudson, there's Hudson Bay. There used to be the pub. I don't know if that's still a chain or not. But so, 1609, Henry Hudson, he was employed by the Dutch East India Company, which it used to just be the Dutch it was divided into Dutch East and West India Company at a point whenever exploration kind of expanded. So he is sent by the Dutch East India Company, and he claimed what is now New York Harbor. So you can picture that area, Manhattan. Went ahead and claimed that for the Netherlands, so for the Dutch, and he too was searching for a passage to Asia. He was just trying to go the northern route. Okay, so that's 1609. Dutch colonists really start populating what's now Manhattan. This is in 1624. It began as a military post. Oh my gosh, everything I just said to you, I got it backwards. He was sent, it eventually becomes the Dutch West India Company. Boy, okay. So, becomes Dutch West India Company. There is no local government. It's more of this, yeah, it's just more of a kind of a military post, all right? So by the 1660s, this is, you know, kind of 3 generations down the line. The population there is up to 9,000 people. And of our European colonizers during this time, the Dutch were, what am I trying to say? The Dutch were the most willing to be good neighbors to their to the indigenous communities that they were moving into. So what does that mean? Well, this is not perfect by any means, but so the Dutch were, it was forbidden for them to settle on any land that was considered under indigenous control. I say control, but they were forbidden to settle there unless they bought the land. So with that, creates a civil relationship. And so this then, yeah, it creates a diplomatic relationship between the two, between our Europeans and then our Iroquois Confederacy. So those are all of the nations in the Northeast. If you need that list, if you go to the closer to the beginning of this PowerPoint, they are listed. But so this is the beginning of diplomatic relations, like I said, but they also taxed their indigenous neighbors, and also had slaves. So they were not immune from slavery as a whole. And so that is kind of where this chapter leads off. So that is talking about everybody else who has tried to come over, is coming over during this point in time and seeing what's going on. And that sets us up for the British, which then that creates the storyline that we kind of know the most. All right. I think that is kind of it. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to email me. I will go ahead and post this. And I will just keep moving along with lectures. I'll hopefully get at least, you know, half of one every day or two up, and then I'll be ahead of you guys by a couple of steps pretty soon. So I think that's it. If you guys need anything from me, give me a shout, and I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye.